So Crisis on Infinite Earths ended pretty recently, and while it was really good in my opinion, and seeing all these characters together, these heroes from across the Arrowverse and across the entirety of the DC multiverse, it was really fun to watch. I do agree with certain criticisms, one of which is that there are certain characters that really should have appeared in the crossover. There are certain characters who didn't appear either because of budgetary restrictions, since the CW doesn't really have a very large budget. There are certain characters who are either CGI, or they use CGI, or the actors would have been too expensive, so they didn't bring that back, or because Warner Brothers had a lot of restrictions and always has had a lot of restrictions on the Arrowverse. Either way though, those characters didn't appear for some reason or another, but they definitely should have, and disregarding those restrictions, I'll be going over a list of the top 10 Arrowverse characters who I think should have appeared in the crossover. And this will be limited to only Arrowverse characters, so not characters from either other TV shows or other movies that were either added in the crossover even before the crossover, because those are separate, and also nothing from Earth 2 since Earth 2 was destroyed before the crossover began. With that in mind, let's begin with number 10. So Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, became more of an anti-hero during Season 5 and 6 of Arrow, but then he left because Warner Brothers is going to make their own Deathstroke movie, and they don't want the Arrowverse to use Deathstroke, except for the Titansverse on Earth 9, they're using Deathstroke, but for some reason the Arrowverse isn't allowed to use Deathstroke anymore, but I do think he should have appeared in the crossover. Again, this is disregarding any limitations, either budgetary or from Warner Brothers, but I do think Deathstroke should have appeared only because, really, he would have been a big help. I mean, realistically, the armies or the teams going up against the Shadow Demons in part 1 and even in the end would be a lot larger than they were. It's just because of the restrictions that they weren't, but I do think that if they were larger, then I do think Harbinger probably would have recruited Deathstroke, because he certainly could have taken out a lot of Shadow Demons, and on top of that, it would have been really awesome to see him again. This would be the Earth X Red Tornado, or maybe some sort of version of that Red Tornado, since the other one on Earth 38 was absolutely terrible and also a villain. This Earth X one was an antagonist in the episode he appeared in, but also he was working for the Freedom Fighters. It was just an antagonist because destroying this Nazi base would have been inconvenient and would have been very detrimental to the Arrowverse's Justice League's plan. So yeah, he was definitely still a good guy. Now the reason I think he should have appeared in the crossover, regardless of any restrictions, is one, because there was the whole Justice League, and Red Tornado in the comics, at least before the New 52, was a very prominent member of the Justice League, so seeing him next to the likes of Superman, the Flash, Green Arrow, and all the others would have felt even more like a Justice League than it already was. But I think beyond that, the fact that Red Tornado had a very large role in the original Crisis, being puppeted by the Anti-Monitor, and used against a lot of heroes from across the multiverse, that could have been something that would have been really cool to see in this version of Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's why he's over Deathstroke, because Deathstroke didn't really have a role in the original Crisis, while Red Tornado definitely did.
You're gonna want to hold on. See ya.
When it was confirmed that Wally West would not be appearing in the crossover, I think that a lot of people were very disappointed, because we don't really get to see much of Wally West, and it would certainly be cool to see him again, but also because it just doesn't make any sense that he doesn't appear. He's a speedster, and he could be at any place, really in the entire multiverse, or if he hasn't unlocked those abilities anywhere in his world very quickly, so it just doesn't make any sense that he doesn't help out a little bit. It was supposed to be explained in a tie-in comic that he helped out, but then he died. However, that tie-in comic was never addressed in the actual crossover, and you would think that the Flash, Iris, the Legends, and all those people would react to Wally's death, but none of them did. So because of that, I don't know if we could count that as an excuse, and I definitely think Wally should have appeared in the crossover, because it would have been really cool to see him, because it doesn't really make any sense that he isn't, and also because in the original crossover, Wally, or some version of Wally, the original Ginger version, had a very large role, as that's where he became the Flash, succeeding his mentor Barry Allen. I'm certainly not surprised that Katana didn't end up appearing in the crossover, but I really think she should have, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that it's always cool to see her, and we really don't get enough of her. Ever since Season 3 ended, we've gotten her in like 2 episodes, I'm pretty sure, so I think it would have been cool to see her yet again, but also because she had a fairly large role in the Crisis setup of Arrow Season 8. She helped Oliver and the Monitor find Dr. Wong, which I don't think it was ever brought up again, but I'm sure it meant something. She helped Oliver fight China White and teamed up with them, but also she brought up the whole storyline of Oliver not trusting the Monitor, and then Oliver went to the League of Assassins, and so on and so forth. That all started with Tatsuya Yamashiro, so because of those things, I really think Katana should have appeared. But also beyond those things, she did have a fairly large, not like huge role, not starring role or anything, but she had a fairly large role in the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, appearing in a lot of pages and a lot of issues. Because of that, I do think Katana, because of all of those things really, I think Katana should have appeared in the crossover more so than even Kid Flash, Red Tornado, and Deathstroke.
Neither are we.
Just like in Elseworlds, but actually even more so in this crossover, the only member of the Legion of Superheroes to have a role in the crossover is Brainiac 5, because he's the only one who was a series regular during those crossovers. Really only Mon-El, who appeared previously, appeared in a crossover, but that was only in like a cameo during Crisis on Earth X. Regardless of those things, also, again, regardless of budgetary or limitations from Warner Brothers, I really think these other members of the Legion should have appeared, because Brainiac 5 appeared, and I think they should have as well, because again, it would be really cool to see them, but also because, I mean, you would think that considering their world is about to be destroyed, they would travel back in time to try to stop it. They traveled back in time to try to stop a different world being destroyed, Winath, from the future. You would think they would stop from the entire universe from being destroyed in the 21st century. I guess the timey-wimey business there is a little bit confusing, but I do think they really should have brought in the Legion for this crossover. Just like Katana, Kid Flash, and Red Tornado, there's also another element, which is the Legion had a very large role in the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, more so than the other characters, and because of all those things, the Legion of Superheroes, mainly just Mon-El and Saturn Girl, really should have appeared.
Queen?
How'd you find me?
Crisis on Infinite Earths had a lot of DC characters, but I think there is one specific element of the DC universe that was missing, other than a cameo right at the end, and that's the Green Lantern Corps. In the original crossover, it wasn't really the Green Lantern Corps that had that big of a role, but the Guardians with Krona had a huge role as Krona began and started the multiverse, and inadvertently created the Anti-Monitor. That role was given to the Monitor in this crossover, but still I think the Guardians and also the Green Lantern Corps could have made an appearance. Because again, you would think that if the world and the universe was being destroyed, the Guardians would send the Green Lantern Corps to help out. They didn't, but I really think they should have, and the main Green Lantern that should have appeared, other than John Diggle becoming John Stewart and becoming a Green Lantern, was Hal Jordan. Hal had a cameo with an Arrow Season 4 Episode 1. He was also indirectly mentioned during the Flash Season 1 Episode 22, when Captain Cold said that there was, or actually no, the Flash said there was some sort of test pilot from Ferris Air who went missing. All of those things were obviously Hal Jordan, which means that sometime between 2010, the flashbacks that we showed, in 2015, when Captain Cold and the Flash were talking about him, he became Green Lantern. He disappeared and he became Green Lantern, and I think that that character really should have made his official debut with an actor in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Since the multiverse was gonna die, you would think the Green Lantern Corps would help out, but they just didn't. But also because with Part 1 and Part 5 heavily focusing on these team-ups where it seems like and feels like the Justice League, Green Lantern obviously would have made it feel like even more like a Justice League, since Hal Jordan specifically is a very prominent member of the team. He didn't really have a very large role in the original Crisis. It was more John Stewart and a lot less so, but also Guy Gardner who had a role. But I do think that he certainly should have appeared in this crossover.
Each with the safe load at one time. The weight, the angle. He was so sure he secured the car.
Go, Kate! Hurry, get out!
So Batman and the Crisis are probably like the two biggest things that the Arrowverse has been setting up since the very beginning. All these references to both of these things, and I think that probably they should have like appeared and debuted in this at the same time, because this is the conclusion. This is the end of the Arrowverse. I mean, it is literally the end of the multiverse. There was a new multiverse that was created, and I think Batman really should have debuted in this crossover. He had a cameo in Batwoman Season 1, Episode 1, where we saw him in costume, which was cool. But I think they really should have expanded on that, and he should have appeared in the crossover, because you would think that with the multiverse ending, he would help out. Yeah, he did quit in 2015, but the multiverse is ending. There's no way Bruce Wayne wouldn't come out of retirement for something like that as Batman. It's also, it would have made Part 1 and Part 5 feel more like a Justice League. I also think Batman deserves to be a Paragon a lot more than Batwoman, who is a newbie and also didn't really do anything as a Paragon. On the flip side of that, Batman would have done a lot. He could have been the Paragon of Courage, or maybe flip something like that, but become the Paragon of Vengeance, and he could have had this whole storyline of reflecting on why he quit, maybe mentioning that Jason Todd's death led him to that or something like that, and I feel like this would have been the best time to do so, not only because, I mean, I really want to see Batman, but also if they ever get to this on Batwoman, I don't think it will be as well written as if we get to it maybe in the crossover, maybe in any of the parts of the crossover, since, let's face it, Batwoman, it doesn't have very good writers. Neither did the rest of the Arrowverse, but they are at least a little bit better, and I would prefer for that whole storyline to be tackled in a crossover as opposed to in Batwoman, so I do think Batman should have appeared in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Worlds will live, worlds will die, and the universe will never be the same.
This is one that it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's really the top 3 of this video that are all characters who it baffles me that they didn't appear. All the characters under it all either really should have appeared or would have been cool to see them, or they had a large role in the original Crisis, but these next 3 just don't make sense. They didn't, starting with Roger Hayden, aka Psycho Pirate, who it just doesn't make any sense he didn't appear. He appeared in Elseworlds, where he was used as the main source of announcement, a main source of confirmation that Elseworlds is leading into the crossover, as he said the famous line, "Worlds will live, worlds will die, and the universe will never be the same." And then the synopsis of Part 5 of the crossover was that direct quote. With all those things, with the fact that Psycho Pirate had a huge role in the original crossover, probably like one of the top 10 biggest roles in terms of like screen time or page time, or whatever you want to call it, Psycho Pirate had a huge role, and all those things come together, and then he just doesn't appear. Somehow he knows the multiverse will never be the same, or at least the universe will never be the same, and worlds will live and worlds will die, and we never see that in this crossover. We never see him reflect on that. We never see his Earth Prime counterpart talk about maybe how the fact that he remembers the old multiverse. We never see any of that. Instead, he just doesn't appear. It's really weird to me, and it doesn't make any sense. Roger Hayden should have appeared. He should have been used by the Anti-Monitor to affect emotions with his Medusa mask, and they really should have went with that storyline. Instead, we didn't get anything out of Psycho Pirate whatsoever. If we do, I hope we actually get there in maybe one of the TV shows, if we ever do, but even if we do, we really should have seen Psycho Pirate in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and again, it baffles me that we didn't.
She showed me what it's like to have a daughter. See you in our next crisis.
This is another one that baffles me very, very much, because up until Elseworlds, the main source of Crisis setup in the Arrowverse was the newspaper, The Crisis of 2024, which is a fight between the Reverse Flash leading an army of shadow demons against the Flash, the Atom, Hawkgirl, Green Arrow, and what you would probably call the Justice League of that timeline. We went through all that setup, the entire storyline of the flashbacks leading up to Season 1, where the Flash and Reverse Flash fight. The Reverse Flash kills Nora Allen, and that creates the Flash Season 1's timeline, where Thawne is trapped in the 21st century. We got all that backstory, all that setup for Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then even more than that, as in the Flash Season 5, with the whole Reverse Flash storyline, it ended with Reverse Flash saying, "See you in the next crisis," and that whole storyline also changed the Crisis from 2024 to 2019. After all that setup, you would assume that Reverse Flash would appear in the crossover, especially since I remember it being officially announced that he will, and then he appeared in a trailer. In the end, however, he just didn't appear after all that setup, after all that confirmation, and even an appearance in a trailer. Reverse Flash just didn't appear at all, and it's really, again, baffling to me, and it doesn't make any sense. I did make a separate video a couple days ago going over why it was actually answered why Reverse Flash and also my #1 pick didn't appear in the crossover, and those were understandable, but at the same time the explanation was the relocation of resources for one, and also because they didn't want to be beholden to a previous headline. The resources thing, the money thing, I just don't understand that. They spent money on a lot of actors, a lot of CGI, they just didn't need to, and instead could have went to the Reverse Flash or my #1 pick. It's really the newspaper stuff, the fact that they didn't want to be beholden to an earlier storyline that I do get, but at the same time, that's something that you just have to respect. The only reason I could say that they could get away with this is if they do the Crisis of 2024 for real, and they actually do end up getting to the Crisis where the Reverse Flash goes back to kill Nora Allen. If they don't do that, then it just doesn't make any sense, and it baffles me completely that Eobard Thawne, aka the Reverse Flash, either played by Matt Letcher or by Tom Cavanaugh, or both, just never appeared in this crossover. Before we get to #1, which you probably know who it is if you've been following my channel for the last couple of weeks, I wanted to go over a couple honorable mentions. In fact, a lot of honorable mentions from across the Arrowverse, characters who either just didn't make any sense, they didn't appear, characters who I wanted to appear, or maybe both of those reasons. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Mr. Terrific, Arsenal, Speedy, Talia al Ghul, Nissa al Ghul, Bronze Tiger, William Clayton, Connor Hawk, Jay Garrick, Accelerated Man, Breacher, King Shark, Miss Martian, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, as well as the new 2 Vixens, Mari and Kuwaze, who after Legends of Tomorrow Season 3 became both Vixens in the new timeline. All of those characters I think either should have appeared, or I just really wanted them to appear in this crossover, again, regardless of any Warner Brothers or budgetary restrictions. With that in mind, though, let's get into #1.
Stand down. Oliver, what the hell are you doing on my Earth?
More so than Reverse Flash, and a lot more so than Psycho Pirate, it just baffles me that Black Canary didn't end up appearing in the crossover. This would be the Earth 2 version, which, yes, I said Earth 2 is off limits, but obviously characters like Dr. Light, hypothetically, but also King Shark and Black Canary are exceptions because they are still alive. Now, this version of Black Canary, I think, should have had a big role in the crossover for a couple of reasons, the least important of which is that she became a very good character in Arrow Season 8, and it would have been really cool to see her. Then there's also the Justice League element, which is that in Part 1 and 5, the Justice League had a very big role, and Black Canary is one of the most prominent members of the Justice League in the comics, and unlike White Canary, obviously, but also Black Lightning, Supergirl, and Batwoman, and even Green Arrow, Black Canary has been a founding member of the Justice League, and should have been in the Arrowverse as well. But other than those elements, which I think are important, but not as important as the next one, there is one very large reason for why Black Canary should have appeared and should have had a large role in the crossover, and even should have been a Paragon, and that's Arrow Season 8. In Arrow Season 8, the reason I think she should have been a Paragon is because in the season, she was directly tested by the Monitor. She was given a test much like Green Arrow, the Flash, Supergirl, and Martian Manhunter. She was tested and then ended up just not appearing. She was tested by the Monitor. She had this whole crisis setup where her Earth was destroyed. She reacted to that, and then she was tested by the Monitor, and she passed the test. And then not only did she not end up being a Paragon, which she really should have been, she didn't even end up appearing. All of those reasons, she's a great character. She would have really fit the Justice League. She should have been a founding member, and she even had this crisis setup where it just really showed that she should have been a Paragon. It baffles me, like I said, more than Eobard Thawne, more than Roger Hayden, that she didn't end up appearing. She should have had a large role, and I will never forgive the crossover. That's going to be always the biggest element of the crossover, a disappointment for this crossover. With that in mind, that's the top 10 characters from the Arrowverse, with a couple honorable mentions that I think should have appeared in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.